For nearly 30 years, two musicians disguised as robots explored the fascinating line between humanity and technology. They ended up becoming one of the most important musical acts of our time. This is the story of Daft Punk. Let's just start with this quote from Thomas Bangalter, one half of the duo. This really gets to the core of why Daft Punk stopped. See, it wasn't because they weren't successful anymore or because the band was fighting. He sees their breakup as this deliberate, almost philosophical move against the nonstop, always-on machine of modern culture. So that's the big question we're tackling, right? How in the world do these two guys in robot helmets build such an incredible, influential legacy? And then why did they just decide to walk away from it all, right at the top of their game? To figure this all out, we actually have to start at the end. In February 2021, Daft Punk just stopped. They announced their split with this 8-minute video called Epilogue. There was no big press release, no real explanation, just this silent, beautiful scene out in the desert where one robot programs the other one to self-destruct. It was weird, it was artistic, and it was a totally Daft Punk way to call it quits. But to really get why they ended things that way, we've got to rewind. I mean, way back. Before the helmets, before they were global superstars, back to the mid-90s music scene in Paris, where they were basically inventing a new sound. This is the sound they helped create, something that came to be known as French house. Their whole method was just revolutionary for the time. They'd find these obscure samples from old disco tracks and then just twist them and warp them with filters until they became something totally raw, hypnotic, and brand new. Their first album from 1997, Homework, is basically the Bible for this style. And these were the guys making that groundbreaking music, not some futuristic robots from space, but Thomas Bangalter and Guy-Manuel de Homem-Christo. Just two young dudes in a bedroom, proving that all the innovation was coming from their brains, not from having a ton of fancy equipment. You know, they got famous pretty fast, and they really didn't like it. So at first, being anonymous was just a choice they made to keep the focus on the music. But as they got more and more popular, the helmets went from being a choice to a necessity. And that's when they transformed from just being musicians into a full-on multimedia art project. This became the central idea of their whole career, the humans behind the curtain versus the machines on stage. All right, so let's jump forward to their 2001 masterpiece, Discovery. This is the moment they went all in on the robot idea and took their vision way beyond just music. They built a whole universe around it. So instead of just making a couple of music videos, they did something nuts. They reached out to their childhood hero, the legendary manga artist Leiji Matsumoto, and together they made an entire animated movie. The whole album, from the first track to the last, is the soundtrack. There's no dialogue, just the music telling the story. And the plot of the movie? Well, it's a massive metaphor for the dark side of the music industry. It's about this super cool alien band that gets kidnapped, has their memories totally wiped, and then they're repackaged and forced to become the biggest pop band on Earth. It's a really sad story about artists being exploited and losing their identity. And you can see how the movie's themes were basically their own reality. By becoming robots and telling stories through animation, they could be everywhere and nowhere at the same time. This quote says it all. They let the art do the talking, totally separate from their own personalities. Okay, so after the slick, polished world of Discovery, and then their much rougher third album, Human After All, came the moment that changed live electronic music forever. We're talking about their legendary world tour from 2006 to 2007. The Alive tour was insane. They performed from inside this giant pyramid covered in LEDs, and they basically took their entire catalog of music and remixed it live into one gigantic, non-stop megamix. It was loud, it was overwhelming, it wasn't just a concert, it was an experience, and it completely rewrote the rules for what a DJ or electronic act could do on a stage. And the single moment that lit the fuse? Their performance at the Coachella Festival in 2006. So many critics, fans, and other musicians point to that one show as the big bang that kicked off the EDM explosion in America. It took dance music out of the clubs and put it onto the biggest festival stages in the world. So what do you do after you accidentally spark a global music movement built on DJs with laptops? Well, if you're Daft Punk, you do the exact opposite. For their last album, Random Access Memories, they just completely flipped the script. And they really committed to this idea. The rumors are that they spent over $1 million of their own money to make this record. Think about that. In an era where album budgets were shrinking, they made this massive personal investment. Their whole method was just a rebellion. In a world of programmed beats and software plugins where you can make an entire track on a laptop, they said no. They insisted on using real, live musicians, recording to old-school analog tape. They were actively fighting against the digital convenience that defined the very scene they helped create. And look who they brought in to do it. It was a dream team of funk and disco legends. We're talking Nile Rodgers from Chic, the session guys who played on Michael Jackson's biggest hits. It's unbelievable. Their goal, they said, was to create music that other people might want to sample one day. They wanted to make timeless classics, not just temporary hits. And that brings us full circle, right back to the breakup. When you look at everything they did, their final act doesn't feel so sudden anymore. It feels like the only logical way to end a 28-year art project. In a recent interview, Thomas Bangalter shared this little story. It's just a simple human moment that really puts their whole incredible journey into perspective. 30 years, man, from a bedroom project to a global phenomenon. So why did they really stop? He finally spelled it out. He said the split was a direct reaction to the world we live in now, specifically the rise of AI and algorithms. That line between human and machine that they played with as art was becoming real, and for them, that was a really troubling thing. Their entire career was a performance piece about our relationship with technology. So by ending the project, by blowing up the robot, they made their final and maybe their most powerful statement. The robots decided they wanted to be human. They walked away to make sure their legacy would always be about human creativity, not about artificial intelligence. And that leaves all of us with a pretty big question to think about, doesn't it? As we're standing right on the edge of this new era of AI-powered creativity, what can we possibly learn from the two artists who built an entire world as robots, only to walk away from it all just to protect their own humanity?